Cross fingers, everyone.
It looks like it's working. It looks like we're live.
Something, maybe someone can check the YouTube and see if we are there. But we can try and say it directly. Hello, everyone from Badajoz, Spain.
Hello, everyone.
This is the southwest of the Iberian Peninsula. And we are thrilled, lucky. I mean, we cannot believe how lucky we are to have Paige with us. Paige is the community lead for the Nature Tech Collective, which was like one of my first dives in the nature tech sector. And it's one of the things I look forward the most almost every week when we have these meetings where people from all over the world and all over the sector come and show us what they are doing to improve the world. Basically, it's
exactly.
Paige had an eclectic, I would say, amazing career. I was checking your LinkedIn and I understood only 50% maybe.
Yeah.
I hope you tell us a little bit about it because it's super interesting.
Definitely.
But for now, like I just want to thank you so much for making the time to be here with us, and please tell us, show us the truth. We are here to learn.
Sounds good. Thanks, Fernando, for the opportunity, and good to see everyone in the class there. Well, maybe I'll start with my background. So I'm Paige. I studied geography actually in university in Dublin. And I really loved that discipline because we were studying the link between humans and their landscape, right? How do we change it? How do we affect it? How have we been affecting it for, the thousands of years in the past? And essentially, some of my favorite classes were about the archaeology of Ireland and what it means for the landscape today. And the biggest learnings as well is that there are very few landscapes in the world that have not been touched by humans. And so during that time, I became extremely interested, laser focused on urban agriculture, actually. Really passionate about how do we grow food in the city? How do we learn how to not necessarily plunder the landscapes around us, but use the infrastructures that we already have internally within our urban landscapes to kind of relearn what food is and how long it takes to grow and close those cycles, basically. And so I did my dissertation on urban agriculture in London, and I spoke to all of the stakeholders involved, the city officials, the urban gardeners, the people who were trying to start potato farms on top of abandoned chocolate factories, and the people who were running community gardens and trying to basically do that reconnection to food and what it meant, but also reconnection to each other in the process, right? And so I loved that, wrote that, my dissertation on that as my graduating thing. And then I decided that I wanted to learn so much more. And then I got really laser focused on hydroponics and aquaponics. And so how do we grow food in water? And so use maybe like 80 to 90% less water sometimes. And so I actually went and did a sort of gap year or learning year in Costa Rica and in kind of California, working on a bunch of different urban farms that were growing food aeroponically, hydroponically, or aquaponically, right? So in water, either using like fine mists of air or just water systems, or involving fish as the base for nutrition for the vegetables, and learning how we create ecosystems essentially that are self-sufficient and can grow our food sources in very small spaces and serve our communities. So I think that was actually potentially my favorite job, because you're kind of waking up in the morning and just kind of hanging out with a bunch of fruits and vegetables and using your body and smelling a lot of wonderful smells and then working with a lot of different people that you're bringing this incredible food to. So I will say I have a huge soft spot for it. But then after that, through kind of turns that I don't need to explain, I landed in London. And in London, I got involved in an incredible project that for a nonprofit called Civic.co. And Civic, their kind of idea was that cities in the world operate under different archetypes. They might be cities after a natural disaster, or cities after a refugee crisis, or cities undergoing regeneration and urban gentrification. And for each of those cities that are under stress, there are people that create business models in response to that might help the other humans around them or the environment around them. And so that we needed to map all of those incredible ideas from across the world and open source them, so that cities with the same archetypes across the world could share knowledge about how to solve these kind of different crises within. And so I was leading the London chapter, which was the urban kind of gentrification archetype. And that meant essentially talking again to all of the people in a specific neighborhood of London called Custom House, where there was a lot of knife crime and really a lot of buildings were being destroyed to build new ones. And so the fabric of people was dissolving. There was a lot of disconnection, people being displaced and sent to other parts of the city because they couldn't afford to live there anymore. And so my role was to come in and build trust, right? To talk to the residents, to the nonprofits there, to the city council there, to the businesses there, any other relevant stakeholder, and listen to all of their issues, problems, desires for the future of their neighborhood, and show up so many times that they started trusting me and they started being able to imagine, maybe actually I do have power over the future of my neighborhood, and maybe I can tell you and start imagining what that could be. And then using all of those different ideas to gather those people and create a living blueprint for the future of the neighborhood. And amazingly, we had 7 empty buildings in a high street that were ours to test with. And so the ideas that came up were things around a BAME bookshop and Fab Lab and also an urban garden. And so it was a beautiful project that basically involved co-designing a future neighborhood that would be resilient to changes, that would be co-created by the residents there, and that would respond to their needs rather than, what potentially capitalism is very able to do, which is kind of destroy and build for the needs of capital. And so that was an incredible project, but then COVID hit. And so at that point, I got involved in another project called Joggle, Just One Giant Lab. And Joggle is an open platform that gathers scientists from across the world to basically share their research and do open science together. And so my role then was not connecting people in person, but connecting people online around different things like hackathons or just community calls as well to share different research that was happening at different places, and help people find collaborators for their science across the world. And that particular world is really, really beautiful because as you'll see from Nature Tech and in general, kind of being able to share your discoveries in science and open sourcing it can only serve the collective in humongous ways. And so I was working with a community that was just incredibly open and collaborative and sharing and not guarded with their discoveries. And so a lot of them were sharing information about the vaccine at that point. And it was really, really lovely working with them. And then you can see basically that kind of my background, it starts with geography and the link with, between human and their landscapes, but then it kind of evolves very naturally into animating communities of practice, essentially, right? How do we bring a lot of different people together, interdisciplinary profiles, for them to connect and share knowledge and start doing really incredible projects together?
Clearly your superpower.
Well, it's different in each context, and that's what's so interesting, is that now I'm doing it in Nature Tech, but this is kind of much more of a private sector community, where the organizations aren't individual scientists, they're not individual residents, they're organizations that need to somehow survive and make money, but they're also trying to serve the world. And so they have to make this really difficult balance between how do I survive as an organization and keep my competitive edge, but also how do I survive in this market that's really emerging where there's no rules. So I really need to collaborate with others to also survive. And of course, the state of the world means that I really need to do what I'm doing, and I'm passionate about it and I believe in it. And so today, those are the people that I'm working with at the Nature Tech Collective, about 180 organizations and some individuals that all believe in the power of nature and nature data and ecosystem services and quantifying all of that to be able to kind of shift our human practices and our human systems towards ones that can be regenerative rather than extractive. And so I have a few other things in my background that maybe I can explain later if, Fernando, you want to dig into them and you saw them on my LinkedIn and you don't know.
Digging.
Yeah, but right now maybe I dive into what is Nature Tech. And I actually haven't been looking. If there's any questions, you'll stop me, right?
Any questions so far before we dive in? Do you need to share something, presentations or?
Well, I was thinking that instead of sharing a presentation, I would go through the 5 M's and find images of the technologies that we're talking about here.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm just gonna get a notebook before you start.
Sounds good.
How did you say that it's called job, or how do you spell it?
Did you hear that?
That platform
No.
that you said.
He's asking about the Yogo platform.
Oh, sorry. Okay, great. Tell me, can you say that louder?
How do you spell it? How do you spell it? That
Joggle, Jogl, just one giant lab. But it's possible that they've shifted business models since I worked there. And so now, yeah, I'll try to look into it and either find you their updated website or a similar platform, because it's not the only one that does that.
okay. And one question: how was like the way you jumped from one place to another normally?
As in, how did I move from one job to another?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Well, I guess we can say that my first deep job was the one in London. And for that one, I left that position because I knew that I did not want to live in that country in particular anymore. And so I took the opportunity during COVID to move back to France, where I now am in south of France. And so that meant that I had to, kindly leave and pass the project on to someone else. And then I applied to Joggle because they needed someone to kind of start managing the massive community that was building on their platform as a result of like a surge in people that wanted to help during COVID. So that was just a very simple application, and using kind of the skills that I had built in person to demonstrate that I could also do it online. And then similarly, all the skills that I had built at Joggle were the exact ones that I kind of needed for the Nature Tech Collective. So I think I found that one on a platform called Work on Climate, which, if none of you have heard of it, or if any of you have heard of it, it's probably one of the most amazing resources for finding jobs in this sphere. because I think there's thousands and thousands of people on it, including lots of employers and people that work in amazing organizations. And so it's a Slack forum where you can both meet other people that are in the jobs that you're looking for and learn from them, also see a lot of job opportunities, but then also attend a lot of different webinars about climate and nature. It's very focused on climate still, and you'll see that that's potentially still a theme in the wider world. But yeah, highly recommend work on climate, and I could probably link you a few others as well, because that's not the only one.
Okay, thank you. I think you can continue with Nature Tech Collective. Okay.
All right. Great. Okay, so let me find. Nature Tech is actually not the easiest thing to explain and talk about, but essentially, we all know what climate tech is, right? All of the technologies in service of climate. And so when we think about the climate market, we think about renewable energies and potentially carbon capture, and also the whole kind of carbon credits market. And I think potentially as humans, we started with that market because carbon is easier to measure. And so that was something that we could focus on and try to solve, right, as a society. But it turns out that climate is only, of course, a sliver of all of the planetary boundaries that we're breaching. I don't know how familiar you are with the work of the Stockholm Resilience Institute and their planetary boundaries framework. I'm saying yes, probably. But we're breaching, I think it's either 6 or 7 now out of 9, and obviously we're in a bad position. And so Nature Tech, I think, aims to recognize the wholeness of nature and our systems. And so instead of focusing on climate, it's the technologies that are focusing on all of the different parts of our planetary systems. So our definition, the Nature Tech Collective, and we're not the ones that coined the term Nature Tech, but we're the ones helping really define it profoundly. But let's say that our definition is, Nature Tech is a broad and a rapidly evolving set of technologies that are designed to enable, to accelerate, and to scale the transition towards the nature positive economy. Nature positive means anything that means regenerative again rather than extractive. It doesn't necessarily mean sustainable where we're maintaining a status quo. It means we're actively trying to restore the systems that we've depleted, right? So I think what's interesting in the transition from kind of thinking only about climate to thinking about nature in general is that we're building on those hard-won lessons from the climate markets, right? The carbon credit market is really just the beginning of a wider change in our economic systems, and it taught us really important lessons about things like, and I can dive into this a little bit deeper later, about verification, additionality, permanence as well. We learned a lot about what works and what doesn't, and now we're applying kind of that knowledge, those lessons, to the full complexity of natural systems. So not just carbon, but biodiversity loss, habitat destruction, soil degradation, water pollution, and species extinction. And so that's both obviously really complicated, but also really exciting and full of opportunities. And I'll tell you a little bit why. And also I will walk around my house to find the charger for my computer so that I don't die there. So just give me 1 second.
This is great.
Here we go. Okay, and again, I will dive into imagery. But for us at NTC, at the Nature Tech Collective, why we think this is exciting is we're seeing a convergence moment, right? One where tremendous opportunity meets tremendous imperative. Obviously, the imperative is that we're facing this breach of all these planetary boundaries. So I'm probably preaching to the choir in this class, but we're crossing past the safe operating space for humanity. And just to recap, out of the 9 kind of planetaries that have been breached, we've already, in my notes it's 6. It's biosphere integrity, biogeochemical cycles, climate change, land system change. But the opportunity that we're seeing is that the urgency of this crisis is driving innovation and also investments. And the scale of the opportunity, right, essentially the whole economy, is attracting also the talent that's needed to solve this. And in this class, I hope you're all part of that solution. If you're interested and if you're learning all of this, that means that you're going to play a part in solving all of the things that need to be solved. So I'm really excited to be here and thankful for your listening. And so to get deeper into it, because what we're talking about is all of the technologies in service of nature and regeneration. That's a lot. And so how do we categorize them? Well, at the Nature Tech Collective, we've developed a taxonomy. That means a way to categorize all these technologies in neat buckets that help us understand it better. Obviously, these technologies fit into several buckets at once, depending on what they are, but they're the following: market pressures, monitoring and measurement and monitoring, modeling, material change, and monetization. And now I'm going to go into kind of each of them. Okay, so market pressures is the bucket that categorizes all of the organizations that are basically setting pressures or tracking kind of like the pressures in the market for us to start acting in this way. So there are organizations like TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, and they're creating reporting frameworks for companies to start understanding where their dependencies are on in nature. So when companies have to disclose their nature risks, suddenly important people in those organizations need to start paying attention. It's like the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, needs to start seeing that, okay, if I'm Coca-Cola, I'm really exposed to different water risks around the world where my factories are. And so if there's no more water, and I can see with specific kinds of modelings that I don't have water here in the next 5 years, then I'm in real trouble and I can't make my product anymore. So that's one thing. Or, for example, right now there's the EUDR, the European Deforestation Regulation. I should know this better. But it's basically what it says is that soon we're not going to be able to source products from places that are causing from kind of supply chains that are causing deforestation. And so that's a market pressure that's acting on a lot of different companies to start needing to adopt technologies to help them understand where their supply chains are potentially using deforested landscapes. And so some of the platforms also that are in this realm are like things like N4C, which is another amazing policy organization that kind of starts mapping the market and tries to understand where all of these policies are emerging and where they're having an impact, or Forest Trends, that's building kind of economic incentives that make conservation profitable and maybe not just philanthropic. And so there's not the best imagery for that particular bucket. So maybe I'll just stick there. But now we're entering into the next M, which is monitoring and measurement. And so that's where a lot of the companies in the Nature Tech Collective are actually. Maybe, I don't know, 60 or 70% of them are the companies that are deploying a lot of really amazing technologies to try and understand the state of the planet. And this is where maybe I can share my screen to I'm not sharing these tips again, and I'm going to share a Chrome tab maybe. And I'm going to say, for example, if we go to So monitoring and measurement, just to come back to what I was saying, are all of the technologies that are measuring and monitoring nature. And there's so many different technologies that do that. We have an incredible webinar, actually, that maybe, Fernando, you can share with them as well. Earlier, I think in February this year, one of our members, Carly, did an incredible presentation on what ground truth solutions are. And ground truth solutions are all of the technologies that are basically a little bit more on the ground or within the landscapes, rather than looking at it from above. So one of the members in our community is Hula Earth, and they have these incredible sensors that measure, that listen to the sounds of the landscape and can kind of analyze who's there and in potentially what quantities. Fernando, also, you can correct me sometimes if I'm wrong, because you also obviously know potentially a little bit better as an ecologist than I do about the different technologies. There's so many like this. There's Hula Earth. There's also Biometrio. And what they then do is they create these incredible platforms that show you where they deploy their sensors and what impact it's having, right? So you can see through lots of different numbers how your landscape is doing and potentially how you can make it better. But okay, let's see. We've got bioacoustics. We've got eDNA. I think Simplex DNA does really good. Can you see my screen, by the way?
We see your Google search.
Okay, great. Sweet. So environmental DNA is basically being able to take samples of water, of soil, even of air sometimes, and being able to understand what species are present within it. So there's a lot of people that are doing that, like Nature Metrics, like Simplex DNA, like Applied Genomics. There's a lot of challenges with that form of data collection, but it's also a really interesting way to measure what exists. There's bioacoustics, there's camera traps. Who does camera traps, Fernando? I'm trying to remember in our community. All right, let's just go with what's a camera trap. Camera traps are obviously kind of things that you put on trees to figure out what species are walking by. So you'll usually put them in a forest on specific pathways that you know wildlife might be using. And so in that way, you can kind of deploy that camera over months within a landscape and see how many different types of mammals there are and how often they're passing by, which allows you to tell a lot about an ecology, for example, if you have wolves or not. And then, of course, then you have LiDAR, which LiDAR kind of for forest. Let's go with R Evolution. I think they have good imagery on their website. They basically take these drones and they're able to measure cubes of forest where they can tell you exactly what's inside of it by the specific type of visualization. And it gives you data that's kind of, and I don't know if you can see the video, but they'll hone in very specific landscapes and through multi-spectral images, able to give these types of images that help you recreate what the forest has. What time are we at? So all of these technologies are collecting a tremendous amount of data about landscapes, and then what they have to do after what you do with all that data afterwards is modeling, right? You have to take all of that data and make sense of it, and so try to generate interesting insights. I'll stop sharing again. What happens then is that there are so many different platforms, and that's also harder to show you, but some of them will help you analyze how a forest is doing. You can establish a baseline and then try to understand through the things that you're implementing, how it's progressing and whether you're actually having a positive effect on that ecosystem. So you'll want to measure things like, you know, biodiversity, but also watersheds and potentially the state of the soil. And there's a lot of ways in which we're still not measuring the full spectrum of things that we potentially should, but that's because those things cost a lot of money. And so again, we're still at that time where we have to make the balance between, okay, how do we measure enough that we can tell that we're having a positive impact on nature, but not too much that it's so expensive that no one wants to use our technologies or our services. So anyway, modeling are all of the technologies that are using that data and drawing insights to help people make informed decisions about where to go next and how to restore nature in the best of ways. There are many use cases for this, whether that's someone trying to figure out, you know, what landscape they should invest in to have a positive impact, or again, what action to take to have a better impact. And then we go into kind of the next M, which is material change. And so that's, in our definition, anything from reforestation to replanting corals to supporting mangroves, but also different things like biotechnology interventions. I don't know if you can still see me because I'm seeing a black screen on my side. Can you still hear me? Oh.
Yeah, Paige, I had to mute myself because there is an echo in YouTube.
Gotcha.
I will turn it on and off.
Is it solved?
Only if I mute myself.
Okay, gotcha.
So we will do it intermittently.
Sounds good. Great, material change. I was on that part. Okay, so yeah, so that's all of the kind of restoration projects or other things like biotechnology interventions. For example, one of the fields that I'm super interested in is biomaterials, right? How do we create materials that are living materials or using living organisms to create kind of closed loop systems. One of my favorite companies, for example, lives in Mexico, and it's called Polybion, and they create basically a bacterial leather, and they're using a bunch of agricultural waste to feed different bacteria to then create these very specific types of biofilms that when they dry, they turn it into beautiful leather that massive luxury houses are using, for example, like Hermes or LVMH. And so there are a ton of ways in which, instead of farming cattle for hectares and hectares, we can actually create one factory where we're using closed loop systems to grow different materials. Or there's also companies in that field like Inversa Leathers. Inversa Leathers is also quite cool. What they do is they take invasive species. I'm going to share my screen again to show you. They take invasive species and they also make leathers out of them. So, for example, in Florida, there's a very specific type of, is it a python? Or is it a boa? The python. That's destroying the landscape because it's been introduced and doesn't belong there. And so they'll create these belts and shoes out of it. Or the silverfin in the Mississippi River Basin, or the lionfish in the Caribbean reefs. Those are all super invasive species. And so they're harvesting them and making products that look like, obviously collaborating with a ton of designers, etc., and making different amazing kind of materials. But what they're also doing is they're using the biodiversity credit market to fund the removal of these species from these ecosystems. So they're smart because they're trying to use dual sources of income. One, the biodiversity credits from their landscape restoration in a sense, and two, the material that they're creating as an output. So yeah, all of that to say that material change is all of those companies where we're trying to materially affect landscapes by either restoring them or finding new solutions to our everyday products that might be much less extractive. Okay, and then the last one is monetization. That one's harder for me to explain, even though it's one of the most important ones, but it's obviously once we understand all of that, how do we fund all of these actions, right? So things like the carbon credit market or the biodiversity credit market are obviously avenues of monetization. And so there are incredible companies, for example, like the land banking group, that have found ways to help companies incorporate the value of nature on their balance sheet. And so essentially monetization includes all of the platforms and technologies that are finding approaches to flow funds into nature. Yeah, and so those are really kind of the 5 M's. Maybe I'll stop here 1 second to just see if there's any questions and if I've made myself clear enough.
I will unpause briefly, thinking about, well, no one is on YouTube, it seems, or is not taking it, but they told me via WhatsApp that there was some echo.
Yes, I see the message. I'm sorry about that. Maybe I should find my own headphones.
Maybe we could do it with headphones, yeah. So, any questions so far? We have one here. Mira a ver si está encendido.
Sí, está en verde. Hello, Paige. Thank you so much for your speech. I had a question about data sharing, because you spoke about different corporations who are measuring and taking a lot of data. But I guess this data is staying in the private sector, or are you also having some, I don't know, exchange with research, or, I mean, something that exits or goes again to the world population rather than staying in profit and that business sector?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good question. That's one of the things that we're trying to solve, in a sense, by existing as the Nature Tech Collective, right? One of the big issues that we have right now is that we don't really know the state of nature well enough to be able to solve a lot of the systemic issues that are happening. And, you know, our premise at the Nature Tech Collective is that maybe that's less of a technology issue. We have a lot of the technologies that exist to measure nature, but it's actually a little bit more of a human issue, right? We don't know how to collaborate properly enough to be able to share that data. And so we're trying, as kind of an industry association, to be that connective tissue between all of the organizations that are gathering this crucial and important data about nature, and have them connect and share more. Like I said before, it's a really interesting space right now, because it's such a new market, such a nascent, emerging, wild, wild west of a sector right now, that there's this real tension between how do I survive and how do I collaborate? And corporations, of course, don't always want to share their data, rarely do, in fact. So things like, you know, Coca-Cola is not sharing with Pepsi, even though they're doing a very similar thing and exposed to very similar risks. So yeah, there's a problem, and that's very much still a reality. Not enough people are sharing their data, and so it's staying siloed in either complex and expensive platforms or in specific corporations. What is happening is that there are platforms like Cecil, which is also one of our members, that's trying to figure out how to aggregate a lot of that data and make it really easy to access through like one subscription, for example. And so they're doing a lot of the work of translating data and organizing it so that anyone can then use it. Because what happens when you collect data, and again, this is not my expertise, is that it's stored in lots of different formats, in lots of different custom fields and things like that. And so every time they get a new data source, they have to clean it in a specific way that they can kind of harmonize it onto their platform and then share it very easily and widely. And they've also been working on a project that's called the Nature Data Sharing Initiative, I think. It's kind of like a slow progress, but it's how do we create really easy legal agreements for different organizations to share their data with each other. Because that's also one of the really difficult things, I guess, if you're a startup or you're a larger organization, is how do you share that data legally and easily? So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's very much an issue. That's very much what we need to start doing, is sharing data. And there's a few solutions towards it, and probably a few more than I know, but still attention.
And thank you so much. I think that might be a problem also in research sector, and that is why our colleague asked you about Joggle, because it's a very interesting initiative to know that we can share data also among scientists or among everyone. So thank you.
Any more questions?
Hi, Paige.
Hi.
Thanks very much for sharing your time with us. I wanted to ask you if it's possible, like not a company, but for example, a university collaborate with the Nature Tech Collective, because we have like a research group in biodiversity, and we are just working very much with audio modes, SM4, and so on, and we are measuring biodiversity. And we would like very much just to collaborate with another companies, or even any person interested in biodiversity and measurement.
Definitely. Yeah, we have a few academic institutions actually within the collective. And it's one of the roles that's really, really crucial in this sector. Potentially to explain just a little bit more who's part of the Nature Tech Collective. We have a lot of startups in MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification. We have a few investors. We have a few corporates. We have a few project developers, right? The ones that are restoring landscapes. But we also have a handful of consultants and academics. And so essentially what we're trying to do is gather all of the roles that are really crucial in nature tech and make sure that they're sharing their perspectives. And so academia and research has a massive role to play, and a lot to learn as well from like the people who are actually trying to apply a lot of these kind of new technologies and research in the real world. So yes, very welcome. And depending on what work you're doing and what impact you're trying to have, we can help you connect with different organizations within the collective.
Thanks very much. Oh, it's working. Okay, I will contact you later.
Sounds good.
Pasadle el micrófono allá atrás.
Hi. Is there any congress where you could join, or going to that congress to meet all those companies or startups? Are you organizing some congress to?
I love that question. Yes, most definitely. Every year now, I mean, we organized the first one this year, but every year we will be organizing Nature Tech Week in London. The next one's going to be in May, the 11th to the 17th, and where we're going to be gathering our community and our ecosystem in general to have a lot of the conversations that need to be had. And for our specific part of Nature Tech Week, what's really interesting is that it's our members in our community that propose sessions, and that kind of surface all of the big knots and challenges that are happening this year in the sector, and that potentially we need to gather and solve together. And so, yes, there's naturetechweek.com. I think the website is up. Of course, there are many others where those conversations and those stakeholders are gathering. COP is happening this week. COP 30. Next year, there's going to be the Biodiversity COP. But what else is there? There was the IUCN conference and Congress this year. We could probably create a list of all of the places that these incredible people gather, and send it over. And then I was going to say another thing. And then also we do webinars as much as we can at the Nature Tech Collective, once every 2 weeks or once every month. And we have a lot of our members there, and they're all posted on YouTube as well, if that's interesting. So you could either join the live webinar and, chat to people, or view them afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely the webinars for now, until you can go to one of the conferences. But it's such an opportunity. And then particularly what I love about the NTC Nows and most of the meetings is that when we have the chance to do small rooms, and then you get to chat with the people doing the work. Those are, I think it was one of my favorite features of the NTC, those small rooms.
I'm going to be much more religious about making that space.
But yeah, I think I will try to maybe parse this video through AI or something and try to get all the links and all the companies and opportunities and resources you mentioned. But also, I mean, it would be nice if you, as the NTC, are working on more. Well, we have the directory that could work too.
There's the directory, and I mean, I've created, I think, a Google Drive of all of our reports, and some of the really early reports as well are foundational materials about Nature Tech, so I can share those. Yeah, anything you need.
Yeah, many of those. I have collected those too.
Good.
Maybe we will set up a folder and share with everyone. More questions? If no one asks, I will go here. So I had the question, could you tell us in slightly more detail, how was the start of the NTC when you got in? Like, how did you connect with someone? There was a conversation about you leading the community. How was that?
Yeah, so let's see. The Nature Tech Collective, just to give a tiny bit more history, started out as something called the MRV Collective, right? Yes, and so originally it was aimed to gather all of the startups that are doing this monitoring, reporting, and verification. And it started just literally as a landing page that said MRV Collective, and somehow there was enough of a vacuum in that space for almost 80 organizations to immediately be interested and kind of like sign up informally, right? And so that was its genesis, and that was also because one of our founders, Gig, was during COVID in Costa Rica, and really trying to basically act systemically to enhance food security in that region, by working with kind of cattle farms and different types of farms. Realized that to get investors, he had to prove that the work he was doing was actually working, and actually a lot of there just wasn't a lot of tech at the time that existed in the sense to be able to reassure investors. Anyway, that's why the MRV Collective existed, because he wanted to gather and start understanding all of the technologies available to him to start proving that work so he could scale it, right? fast forward probably hundreds of conversations that the founding team had with the sector, interviewing corporates, investors, and other people on the demand side to try and understand what would make them start adopt these technologies or pay for these technologies and integrate them into their work. They realized that there was a real gap in kind of understanding and alignment between those two kind of personas, right? Supply side and demand side. And so we decided, actually, we shouldn't just be the MRV collective. We should be the Nature Tech collective. We should be able to be a space where we're connecting supply and demand. And so when I came on, it was basically for two reasons. It was to start bringing in much more of those personas of the demand side, investors, project developers, corporates who were to use all of those incredible technologies of modeling and measurement, but also to create spaces where they could have interesting conversations, where they could share knowledge, where they could share difficulties. And that's quite difficult in a decentralized sense in a nascent sector where there's not a lot of trust to begin with. So I guess, I mean, there's 1,000 ways that I could answer your question, but the first thing that we had to do is kind of formalize the membership a little bit more, rather than a loose collective where people just signed up, signed their name on a website. We needed to create a system where people were inclined to contribute their time and their knowledge so that we can create real atmospheres of collaboration. And so I guess that was part of my role, is to really actually start going to all of the members and try to listen to what their needs were and what their availability was and how it was that we could start gathering them so that there would be more collaboration. And it's still kind of quite a long piece of trust building and work to kind of create the decentralized culture that allows for each of the people in the startups to say, okay, I work for X company, but I'm also a part of the Nature Tech Collective. And so I'm going to represent my company and spend some of my time attending webinars, potentially starting working groups, potentially, building a little toolkit about this particular piece of Nature Tech, like, where are the places where I can get biodiversity data, or things like that. And so we're trying to create that relationship and that culture of contribution of members within the organization. And that is actually quite a bit of trial and error in a sense, right? Startups in general, which are the big piece of our community, are environments where you're surviving to make money and find the right business model that would help you kind of sustain this organization in the long term. And so by definition, you're quite time poor and resource poor. And so not necessarily a lot of opportunity to give your time and collaboration. And that's why it's so incredible that Nature Tech Collective exists, is because despite most of them being startups, they're also really keen on sharing their knowledge and collaboration. And so now we have to figure out how to channel that in the best of ways. And that, again, also in a nascent sector, is not always the easiest, because there's still so many unknowns, right, about how people should and could collaborate with all of these new technologies and these new markets and rules emerging. So it's quite a space of staying with the trouble and living with uncertainty and trying to help in the best way that we can.
Yeah, we are lucky that the sector is so kind and they offer their time like that.
Yes.
Are you, let's see, which link that you facilitated in the Nature Tech Collective are you the proudest? Like, was does something come to mind where two members connected through the Nature Tech Collective and now they created something new or generated new opportunities? Or even within the Tech Collective, that people from different startups or members created something within the Tech Collective, like a resource or something? Is there something that comes to mind?
Oof, that's a really tough question, because, I mean, yes, there are dozens of examples like that, but we have trouble tracking them because we don't systematically ask after we connect people. But let's see, if I dig, who can I think about? I think, and how much can I actually say that's not that's not their proprietary information? If I'm not mistaken, during one of the NTC Nows, Biometrio was doing a presentation, and there's this other company called Hyphen. Hyphen is a tower. They basically measure fluxes using atmospheric towers. And that's one way of measuring nature. But if they incorporate Biometrio's solution, which is also kind of like a bioacoustic and potentially camera trap at the same time, then they can measure different sources of data, different types of environmental data at the exact same time. And so, to my knowledge, they're currently exploring how to collaborate and how to combine their technologies to be able to measure very complete information about the landscape and be able to offer that to customers down the road. So I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's just one of the ones that I remember right now.
Controlling my voice. That's wonderful, Paige. And I don't know, do we have more questions, more ideas, more requests? Do you have a question for them, Paige?
Yes, had you guys heard of Nature Tech before as a term? See a lot of no's. Cool. And in general, like what, I mean, I'm asking a whole class, so it's probably really hard to get an answer, but do you already know like what kind of fields you want to work in, or what spaces, what industries, what landscapes?
I think many people here, they want to be in the field measuring stuff.
Measuring.
Isn't that right? Yes, this morning they were in the field already measuring.
Cool.
Yeah.
How are you measuring stuff in the field in this academic setting?
¿Quién tiene el micro?
¿Qué me ha preguntado? Me he olvidado. Well, I'm not a student and I'm autonomous. I'm doing the measuring, reporting, and verification for photovoltaics, eolics, cities, and I measure all I can. I measure bats, or insects, or birds, or plants, or.
And with what, do you use technology or do you use your
Yes,
eyes?
I use AudioMoth Minibat for bats.
Nice.
And camera traps for some of mammals, birds in water points.
Cool.
And I would like to have a tool to measure in distance or the bees, because I have some solitary bees hotels, and I'm studying the ¿cómo decir? La forma, ¿no? El modo, the way to not need to go all the days to see if there is something new.
Yeah. I'd imagine, or in my mind, I feel like there are bioacoustic devices that are attuned to, those types of insects specifically. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Wild Labs community, right?
The wetlands. Yes, I know.
Okay, great. Then I'd imagine that's the place where they have ideas for you.
Yes,
but hopefully then you can explain to all of those amazing students much better than me the measurement and monitoring part of this.
You had another request earlier.
Yes, well, I have a very particular concrete question, because yesterday, a company has requested me for a person who works with Sentinel images to monitor the Azola progress in un embalse, ¿cómo es?
Dam.
In a dam, in a very big dam. And I know no one.
Which tool will they use? Will they need to use?
They need to use, the satellite Sentinel and the tool that I don't know how to use it. And I don't know where to find someone who knows how to do this monitoring.
Well, why don't you write me a little paragraph and I can post it out in my newsletter and community. And that's also the power of community. If I don't know, someone does. And same with Wild Labs, honestly. Post it on both our platforms, and potentially we'll find someone for you.
And finally, a single person as me or as one of us can join to the Nature Technology Net.
Yeah.
Yes, the collective. How? Because I have seen the the fees, the annual contribution tiers.
Yeah.
And for a single person is like out of or
Out of
range.
reach. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw, if you scroll a little bit down on our website, there's also the opportunity to, instead of paying for the membership, to provide an in-kind contribution, which means contributing your time and your expertise.
Okay.
And so that's one of the pathways. We understand that not all of the startups are rich right now. And so we've tried to create ways for everyone to have a stake in the game. And so yeah, there's ways to offer office hours or to create a particular resource with us that would be useful for the rest of the sector and things like that. Basically, yeah.
Okay.
I can tell you more about that afterwards if you are genuinely interested.
That's what I was doing.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think there was another question, but I think we are in 1 hour. So for now, if you agree, I'm gonna turn off the streaming, but we can stay here, and this will be only for us. So that if someone is shy or doesn't want to go on YouTube, we can ask more questions now, even practice some Spanish, Paige.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's see if I managed to do this. Okay, thank you for anyone that watched this stream. We continue at maybe 10 past 4.